In the heart of West Africa, where the Sahel meets the unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert, a quiet revolution has begun, one that carries the power to redefine the very meaning of survival and resilience in regions long plagued by drought, scarcity, and despair. At the center of this revolution stands Ibrahim Traoré, the young and defiant leader of Burkina Faso, who has stunned the world not with military might or political theatrics, but with something far more profound: the harnessing of salt water into a desert miracle. What might have once sounded like a myth from ancient times has now become a reality under his vision, sparking hope not only for his nation but for Africa and beyond. For generations, the Sahel has been synonymous with scarcity. The climate crisis has only deepened the suffering, with encroaching deserts consuming fertile lands and rendering once thriving communities into desolate patches of dust. Food insecurity, water shortages, and mass migration have been the unavoidable consequences. International organizations poured billions into aid programs, yet year after year the desert crept further south. To many it appeared as if the region had been sentenced by nature itself to a fate of perpetual crisis. But then came a different kind of leader, one who understood that the solutions imposed from outside had failed, and that only bold, indigenous innovation could rescue his people. The concept was simple, yet audacious, transforming salt water, abundant yet unusable, into fresh water that could breathe life into arid land. While desalination has existed for decades, it has often been dismissed in Africa as too costly, too energy-intensive, and too impractical for nations with fragile economies. Yet Traoré refused to accept that narrative. He recognized that Africa, rich in natural resources and increasingly in renewable energy, had the means to leapfrog outdated systems and pioneer solutions tailored for its own survival. By channeling both political will and scientific ingenuity, Traoré laid the foundation for what is now hailed as a desert miracle. At the core of this initiative is the integration of solar-powered desalination plants. These are not the sprawling industrial complexes seen in oil-rich Gulf states, but smaller, decentralized units strategically placed in regions most vulnerable to drought. By marrying Burkina Faso's abundant sunlight with advanced but cost-effective desalination technologies, the impossible became possible. Clean water flowing into communities that once queued for hours at dusty wells or trekked miles for a single bucket. Traoré understood that technology alone was not enough. It needed to be accessible, replicable, and rooted in community ownership. This principle of decentralization allowed villages to become self-sufficient, rather than reliant on a distant capital or foreign aid. The impact has been nothing short of transformative. Fields once abandoned have been brought back to life, with farmers cultivating crops in areas that were previously barren. Salt water, long dismissed as useless in the context of landlocked Burkina Faso, was transported through innovative pipeline systems that tapped into underground reserves and imported reservoirs, then processed into fertile lifelines for agriculture. What had been a parched desert began to see the green shoots of renewal, and for the first time in decades, the narrative of scarcity began to shift toward one of abundance. The symbolism of this achievement cannot be overstated. In the global imagination, Africa has too often been portrayed as a continent begging for survival, forever dependent on the benevolence of outsiders. Traoré's saltwater miracle defies that stereotype with brute force. It is a declaration that Africans are not merely victims of their environment, but masters of their destiny, capable of harnessing science and technology to shape their future. By delivering results in the most tangible form, water and food, Traoré has done what decades of international conferences and climate summits have failed to achieve. He has given the people proof that transformation is possible. Of course, such a breakthrough has reverberations far beyond Burkina Faso. Across Africa, leaders and citizens alike are watching closely, eager to see whether this model can be replicated in regions from the Horn of Africa to the deserts of Namibia. Countries suffering under similar conditions are already in discussions with Traoré's government to share technology, expertise, and best practices. The possibility of an African-led water revolution is no longer an abstract dream, but a looming reality. For once, Africa does not look outward for solutions. Instead, the world looks to Africa for inspiration. The global community, however, has reacted with mixed emotions. On the one hand, environmentalists and climate activists have hailed the development as groundbreaking, a testament to what innovation rooted in necessity can achieve. On the other hand, there are powerful interests unsettled by the implications. Western aid institutions, long positioned as the saviors of African crises, now find themselves sidelined by a homegrown solution that reduces dependence on their funds. Global corporations involved in water privatization and agricultural exports fear the ripple effects of self-sufficient African communities that no longer rely on overpriced imports or exploitative contracts. In this way, Traoré's desert miracle is not just a technological breakthrough, but also a political earthquake that threatens entrenched systems of global dependency. Critics have attempted to downplay the achievement, arguing that it is still on too small a scale to address Africa's vast water and food insecurity challenges. Yet history shows that revolutions rarely begin at scale. They begin with proof of concept, with small sparks that spread until they ignite entire regions. The first solar desalination units in Burkina Faso may serve only a handful of villages, but their success is already rewriting the mindset of what is possible. When a child drinks clean water from a tap in a place that once knew only thirst, the narrative shifts forever. Traoré has also been careful to frame this not merely as a national achievement, but as part of a continental mission. In speeches and regional forums, he emphasizes that Burkina Faso's progress belongs to Africa and that the technology and know-how will be shared with neighbors at little or no cost. This message has been particularly powerful in a continent long divided by borders drawn by colonial powers. Water, Traoré insists, does not recognize colonial lines, and neither should the solutions that ensure survival. By casting his initiative as part of a collective African renaissance, he has positioned himself as both a national leader and a continental statesman. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of this story is the psychological impact it has had on ordinary people. For decades, the Sahel has been weighed down by a sense of inevitability that poverty, hunger, and migration were unchangeable fates. Traoré's saltwater miracle disrupts that fatalism. It instills belief in the possibility of change driven by African hands and African minds. In the eyes of farmers, mothers, and children who now drink from once empty wells, the impossible has become possible. And that belief is a resource more valuable than water itself, for it fuels the determination to push further, innovate deeper, and never again accept despair as destiny. The implications for geopolitics are equally profound. With water increasingly recognized as one of the most precious resources of the 21st century, nations that can secure and even export fresh water are poised to wield enormous influence. If Traoré succeeds in scaling up this initiative, Burkina Faso, once dismissed as one of the world's poorest and most vulnerable countries, could become a regional power, not through military dominance, but through control of life's most essential element. This shift could disrupt long-standing hierarchies, elevating African nations into global players not out of charity, but out of necessity. In many ways, the saltwater miracle mirrors Africa's broader struggle for independence in the modern era. Political sovereignty was achieved in the mid-20th century, but economic dependency persisted through neo-colonial systems that left African nations vulnerable to external control. Traoré's initiative represents a break from that cycle. By taking ownership of solutions to Africa's greatest existential challenges, he demonstrates that the continent can chart its own course, free from the dictates of foreign capitals. This is why the development resonates not just within Burkina Faso, but across Africa and the wider global South. The journey, of course, is far from over. Scaling up desalination in a landlocked country presents unique logistical challenges. Building infrastructure, ensuring long-term maintenance, and training local expertise are complex tasks that require sustained effort. There will be setbacks, and there will be resistance from those who profit from the status quo. But the seed has been planted, and its growth is now inevitable. Even if obstacles slow its progress, the proof of concept has already shattered the myth of impossibility. The desert has been made to yield, and that fact cannot be erased. Looking forward, one can envision a transformed Sahel, not as a graveyard of hope, but as a frontier of innovation. Villages once abandoned could be re-inhabited, migration patterns could be reversed, and Africa's vast youth population could find purpose in building solutions rather than fleeing crises. The ripple effects on food security, economic growth, and political stability could be monumental. And all of it, history will remember, began with the bold decision of one leader who dared to believe that salt water could be turned into a desert miracle. As Traore himself has often reminded his people, miracles do not fall from the sky. They are forged by human hands, guided by vision and courage. In turning salt water into life, he has not only given his nation water, but has offered the entire continent something even more essential, hope. And in a world increasingly defined by scarcity, it may be Africa, led by visionaries like Traore, that teaches humanity how to thrive in the face of adversity.